Josh, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
Feels good, we in nature, in the sticks, like how we call it, but I'm good. I can't complain, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I like to hear that, man. I'm happy that we're here. This is a
Nah,
beautiful place.
nah, for sure. For the people, that don't know, we literally location scouted this location right here. We're not gonna tell you where it is, but just know we in Florida and we proud to be out here in Florida in the sticks.
Very well said.
For the people that don't know who you are, introduce yourself.
Cool. I'm Josh Aronson. I'm an artist and photographer based in Miami, Florida. And for the last 5 years or so, I've been fixated on photographing young Florida people in nature.
Okay, okay. Man, I just want to say this, Josh. This is truly an honor to be interviewing you. I know you probably say the same, but nah, this is I can't wait till we, finish this interview because I always, when we do talk, it's always a lot of knowledge, a lot of encouragement, a lot of, different things, and just hearing your mind right now is truly an honor. So I just, want to let you know that before we even start, for sure.
Wow. Thank you. I mean, the feeling is mutual.
Yeah.
You're a real legend and a real inspiration for me. So, honestly, anytime I get with you, just to sit down and chat is always very valuable.
Yeah.
And doing it in this place
All
with the
right.
camera is pretty cool too.
Yeah.
So,
No,
thank
for
you.
sure, for sure. So I want to start off with the interview with your upbringing. Can you tell me where you're from originally and what was your upbringing like growing up?
Yeah, for sure. So I was born in Toronto, Canada in 1994,
Hmm.
and I moved to South Florida in 1997 when I was 3 years old. And growing up, as a transplant in Florida, I had a unique relationship to this place.
Hmm.
In one part, it was home for me. And then in the second part, it was sort of like foreign.
Hmm.
And that kind of dissonance that came from not truly being from somewhere that I lived, made me aware and sort of bred my perspective on where it was that I was living and where it was that I was spending time. And I think that experience of being part foreigner, part outsider, and part local, part someone who belonged, really kind of shaped my perspective as a photographer and really
Hmm.
informs how I go about photographing things here in Florida now.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. But I can honestly see that with your work. Like, I feel like when you seeing your pictures, not even just your a recent project, but just in general, when I see it, it's like a kid in a candy shop, just documenting and just something that you just amazed by. So that definitely give me that vibe and stuff like that. What are some of the memories from your childhood that still inspire your work today?
I think the memories that still inspire my work right now, you know, would be those memories I had as a kid after school, coming home and getting a couple hours before the sunset to go out and explore and be with my local friends. And during that time as a kid, I would take my bike out and I would ride around on the hills or the fields that were out past our backyard, behind the house. And those experiences where the sun was that kind of golden hour type of light, and the kind of horizon felt sort of endless, were really transformative. And I think they are often the kinds of things that are inspiring me to go out and make pictures, to try to share that kind of moment or that feeling with other people,
Hmm.
through photography.
Wow. So who were some of the most influential people in your life growing up?
Hmm. Growing up, the most influential people in my life were probably the camp counselors that I had at the sleepaway camp I went to every summer for almost 10 years. And those counselors were sort of like adult figures in my life who, unlike my family, my parents, had only a sort of like temporary relationship to me and the other campers. So in that temporary relationship, the counselors were able to offer us a kind of wisdom and a kind of perspective that our parents who, had to be concerned with all the other things that come with being a parent couldn't really offer. And I think I learned from those counselors about perspective specifically. My one counselor, Eric, he always preached having an eagle's eye perspective in life. And if you saw things with an eagle's eye perspective, he said, you would be able to evaluate from afar and then approach with a real kind of like concentrated and thoughtful response. And that's a life lesson that stayed with me, to this day. So shout out Sleepaway Camp.
Now, for sure, it's crazy because as we get older, you start to understand your childhood affects what you are as an adult. Like the things, those little moments that as a child you like, whatever. But then as you get older, like, oh nah, like it's very important. Like, like we was talking about earlier, like just maybe like nature and like different elements in life. Like for instance, when I was a kid, I used to love after movies, I used to look at behind the scenes and just like, yo, how do they film this? How do they film this? And then now I'm doing this, and it's crazy how those implements to your future and stuff like that.
It's so true. The seeds of like who we are right now probably were planted many, many years ago when we were kids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that goes on to my next question. Were there any specific moments or experiences in your youth that made you want to pick up a camera?
Well, as a kid, I really wanted to be an actor.
Word.
And so to become a better actor, I thought I should learn how to make a movie, as a director or cinematographer. And so I began to explore what made movies better than others and how to make a good film myself. And as any, cinematographer or director would know, one of the pathways to making a great movie is through making a great image. And to make great images, you have to understand cameras and photography. Right. So by way of acting, I found photographing and sort of decided to leave acting and filmmaking behind and pursue photography more seriously.
Mm-hmm. What was the key things, or what was it like picking up your first camera? Like, what was that moment like for you, and what was the ultimate goal after picking up that camera, and what was the journey it took you?
I mean, picking up my first camera was a beautiful moment because it was actually my dad's first camera that he gifted to me. It was an old Pentax SF1N 35 millimeter, analog film camera. And my dad had bought it for himself back in the 80s on a trip to New York. And when he gifted me that camera, it was a real sign of encouragement for me as a young person exploring the arts and exploring being creative. It's not often the case that parents will be supportive of their kids pursuing something alternative and something that doesn't offer, the guarantee of financial stability. So to have my father's encouragement and the very same camera that he used in his own life traveling around was really exciting. And I think in a way that foundational experience, helped me to take photography more seriously.
Word. It's crazy. My first camera was a Nikon D3100. And that moment when I was at the store with my grandma, I was just like, yes, it's crazy. So just hearing that from you is crazy. And even just like, just your first picture, just capturing stuff. It's just those little moments. My first camera was like a Pentax K1000. I got it at the thrift store. I was in high school, grabbed it. I'm like, I know how to shoot, but this is a whole nother level. Do they even still do prints or scans
film,
and stuff like that? But it's just crazy how those moments and those times as a kid just transition to, just gaining the knowledge of what we got to do to what we do today again.
It's so true.
Yeah.
I love that story of your grandma kind of surprising you and getting you that camera for that photography class you wanted to take. It's such a good story.
Man, yeah. When did you first realize you had a passion for photography? Because there's a difference between just getting your camera, shooting random things, to where you're gaining knowledge to have a passion for photography?
Yeah, I first realized that I had a passion for photography as a high school student. I would bring a point and shoot camera or a disposable camera around class with me, and I would take snapshots of my friends and pictures of my friend group at school and then later at parties. And I found that I was compelled to compile all the best snapshots and photographs that I took and save them up so that when I felt I had a good enough, body of work, a good enough collection of snapshots, I could release it out to people. And what I would do at that time in high school was I would create these albums on social media sites like Facebook. And for each album, I would design a cover with a unique name and its own type and style, and I would compile, months and months of photos and put the very best ones out in that album. And in hindsight, I realized what I was doing without really knowing it was creating my own version of like a digital photo book. And I think that excitement that came from saving things up and then releasing them all at once for people to enjoy is what like really fueled my passion and got me thinking less so about just going out and taking pictures, but more so about using photography to make a statement or tell a story or create a world. And it all kind of started with those Facebook albums.
Wow, especially that was Facebook around that time. It was popping.
It was fire.
Facebook was like the Instagram before Instagram, really.
Yeah.
And just that's crazy. You could just post 20 pictures on Facebook.
Yeah.
Like nothing.
It's true.
So, who were on on your journey of gaining that passion for photography? What photographers inspired you over that time?
Yeah, in those early days for me, I was most inspired by Ryan McGinley, who is a New York photographer and artist that would photograph his friends and downtown New York artists in nature, oftentimes naked. And I first found those photographs on Tumblr and around the internet, and I felt a deep kind of like connection or compassion for the scenes that he was creating and the way in which he would photograph these bodies in motion. And I often wanted or imagined making pictures like that myself, but in high school at the time, I don't think I had the resources or the know-it-all to do that sort of thing. But the impact of Ryan's pictures like really stuck with me. And then when I moved to New York in 2017, I had the fortune of working in Ryan's studio.
Wow.
And spending a couple months deep in his archives, and that experience too was really kind of transformational. And getting to spend like hours and hours with like one of your idols' work in such an intimate way, really opens your eyes to like what they're doing, what they're photographing and then not using, what they're photographing and using. And so I count that as like one of the most kind of foundational experiences for me.
But how was you in that moment, just seeing that? Were you like, damn, shit, like this is my fucking idol? Like how were you emotionally? Because this is like, and I can only imagine. You saw the archives that he never released and everything. How was that moment, like feeling wise?
I was nervous. I was nervous. I mean, this was Ryan McGinley, such a legend, and I was, hanging out in the studio, helping him with his project. So there was nervousness and excitement and curiosity. I remember after the first couple months, just walking around New York and feeling like everyone that walked by me was one of Ryan's subjects. And so I would kind of like be out and feel like, oh my God, like I've seen that person naked and that person naked. And I know what this person looks like naked. And, all that to say, like, there's very few photographers that have photographed so many different artists and creatives of a particular moment in the way that Ryan has.
Wow.
And I think getting to connect with all those people through his work was really special.
Oh, that's amazing. So diving in more into your work, right? How would you describe your photography style and how has it evolved over time?
Mhm. You know, I would describe my style as being very informed by warm colors, a almost tropical color palette, and a warm use of natural light. You know, over the last 6 or 7 years, I've been focused on photographing young Floridians in natural settings. And so my style is really defined by those more or less strict limitations.
Mhm.
Um, in particular, in the last few years, I've been photographing young men from Florida in really remote and really sort of natural surroundings. In particular, I'm using this kind of stage narrative language of photography, which allows me to create these tableaus that exist only, for the camera. And then when we move our camera, those scenes kind of disappear. So in that sense, I'm working in that tradition and kind of finding my style through experimenting with those limitations.
Right, right. And like I said earlier, with your work, what gravitates me to your work is just the storytelling element, right? Like when I'm just looking at every time I look at your picture, I'm not just looking at one thing. I'm looking at it from left. I'm literally scanning it and literally like, yo, it's just like your work is just the definition to me. I'm not just saying this just to say this, but your definition of photography. Because when I look at an image that sparks my eye, I want to really look through side by side of the image and really see what the photographer's story that he or she is telling, and
Mhm.
your work gives me that.
Thank you. Yeah, I
Hmm.
appreciate that. Yeah, I think when I'm making photographs, I'm trying to think of the experience that I could create for a viewer. So, if I can hold you and your eye in the picture for longer, then I'm going to try to do that because I want you to get, absorbed into that world that we're creating and to feel the things that the photographs are going to allow you to really feel.
Right, right. So, what do you think is the most important aspect of being a photographer from your perspective and opinion?
Hmm. To me, the most important aspect of being a photographer has to be, without a doubt, your perspective. And what I mean by that is like, no matter what tool you have, no matter what cameras or lenses or equipment, if you don't have a thoughtful and considered perspective, then your photographs aren't going to be what they could ultimately really be. So I think it's important that we all consider our perspectives and try to like nurture them, try to reference, try to look at what's come before us, and let all of that inform how we see the world and how we choose to use our camera to make pictures.
All right. Speaking of references, can you walk us through your creative process when approaching a new project or shoot?
Definitely. Um, to me, the creative process when approaching a new project or shoot really starts in this phase of absorbing. So I like to essentially absorb as many photographs, references, films, books, advertisements, things that I can about a particular subject that I'm interested in. And once I feel that I've kind of like oversaturated myself and like absorbed too much, like
Right.
I'm all just like full, I'm stuffed because I ate so many references and so many images, then I know it's okay, it's time for me to kind of like release and let some of those out in the way, that I choose to do. So, um, I'm letting those references and, inspiration points inspire me, and then going out and kind of making my own thing from them.
All right. And yeah, because you could definitely get in a rabbit hole. Just like one of my top places to find references is going to Pinterest. So I might see one picture here, all my tabs will literally be open all over the place.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to make us stop. Like, Aaron, just stop, because you could go real deep into it.
It's true. It's hard to know when to stop, especially because like that process can be so fun and so interesting too. Like having an excuse to just like go through photography history or go through books in the library, like that can be so rewarding, and relaxing
Yeah.
and informational. So like knowing when to stop is hard, but I think you have to kind of trust your intuition, and if you feel like you've got enough inspiration to feel that drive to get out
Right.
there and go make something, then you should follow that and let it drive you and
Right.
inspire you.
Even I just wish we had beyond more than 24 hours. Because I'll be like, sometimes I'll go to the library or I'll check out my own books and just be like skimming through it, like, okay, I would need this reference. But then just like, next thing you know, this 5 hours just passed and it's like, oh shit, it's nighttime. It's time to go to bed.
Agreed. There's just like never enough time in the
Right.
day.
Right.
Especially for us as like photographers or filmmakers, I feel like there's like, only 10% of our time that's spent really making pictures or making films, and the rest of it is really, research and coordination and
Right.
management and outreach. And so like yeah, we need more time. We just need more time.
And a lot of people don't understand the behind the scenes of, you even said like the management part. Like if we have like a project or a certain type of shoot with a client or whatever, we got to deal with all this. And then the last part is really pushing that button to capture everything. And it's just like, well, really not the last thing, but one of the last things of that day that you have to do. And it's just like, mentally, you just like,
You might be tapped out.
Yeah, for sure.
Got to reserve your energy.
Yeah, yeah. So going back to, really tapping in within yourself, as in like your perspective on photography or your projects, what drives you to tell stories through your work?
It's an interesting question because sometimes when I think about photography, I think of it almost in the opposite way. Like photographs have narrative elements because there is a subject and a place
Right.
and an action. But at the same time, they're also like this suspension of narrative because they're a moment, a specific moment frozen in time and not a complete narrative, with a beginning, middle, and end. And so recently I've been kind of like going up against that idea of photographer as storyteller or me as like someone who's telling stories with my pictures. But at the same time, I understand that there is something I'm looking to explore to get out there by going out and making pictures. And I think for me, a lot of times that is something autobiographical.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very interested in making photographs that can help me better understand my own experience. So with my last 4 or 5 years of work where I've been photographing young men in nature in Florida, I think I'm curious about what my experience of youth was and what my experience of masculinity is,
Right.
and trying to use photography as a way to see or to like make real more people like me, more people who share my own kind of feelings about masculinity or about nature or about Florida or about each other. And so maybe in a way that's kind of the stories that I'm looking to tell.
Right. Do you think your personality shows in your work?
Yeah, I think so. I think, like I said, I'm interested in using photography as an autobiographical vehicle.
Right.
And so oftentimes, when I'm out photographing with groups of people, I'm asking them to, wear clothing that comes from my own personal wardrobe,
Right.
or the kind of gestures or staging that I'm directing them to do are moments that come from my own memories and childhood experiences. So, there definitely is like an inflection of me in the work. And I would say to all, photo makers, like try to ask yourself like how you can see more of yourself in your
Right.
pictures, and it'll kind of yield some interesting results.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I always kind of say this, we kind of like composers.
Definitely.
Especially your work, because I remember the story you told me. We're going to get to that for the Florida boys, but one of your pictures, it's kind of like, seeing it from a POV, it's kind of like, you're putting the subjects in place, but it's just like, before you even capture that moment, you're just composing. Like, you literally like, go right here, put right here. You know what I'm saying? So
Definitely.
that's a lot, Go ahead, my bad.
No, it's so true. There's so many like parallels between photography and music. I feel like that's not spoken about as much as it should be. But yeah, we're oftentimes like composing an orchestra of characters, like who are helping us to create like this vision that we have in our minds. But also in terms of music, like, you know, there's this concept of musicians who put out albums and singles and mixtapes, and you know, I like to think of like the work that I'm doing in terms of those things. You know, is this going to be an album? Is this going to be more like a mixtape? Does it feel
Right.
like it's just a single? Like, you know, the way that music exists, like relative to itself, like multiple songs informing one another versus just like a single coming out and being its own thing on its
Right.
own. Like, I feel like that's how I try to think about photographs too. You know, like,
Right.
is this a book, and are these pictures in relation to each other, or are they just existing on their own?
Right. What do you hope people feel or think when they look at your work? I know that's a hard one.
Yeah, but yeah, I know what you're asking. I mean, for me, my hope is that people look at my work and they see how I'm using photography to sort of like imagine my own ideal version of the world and make it feel real. And I hope that they feel that they too can kind of imagine their own ideal version of the world, and maybe even use photography or whatever tools they may have to make that version more real. So in a way, it's like I hope my photography can inspire others to dream up their own kind of fantasies, and maybe even go and pursue those and make them feel, you know, real to them.
Right. Right. From your perspective, what is your favorite part of the photography process? Planning, shooting, or editing?
My favorite part is definitely in the planning. You know, I love research, I love history, and I love having an excuse to pursue those two things. So for me, as much as like, you know, the shooting is so integral and post-production makes such a difference, you know, it's in that planning phase of researching, location scouting, that I feel really most inspired. You know, I think my dream day is like being out on location, you know, in Florida, in, you know, the country, and getting to just walk around with my iPhone camera and imagine like what a good picture might look like and how to frame it and where I'm going to stage people.
Right.
That's like almost like vacation to me. You know, that's my like dream day in a way.
Right. I could say the same thing too. Like, because you're just gathering up information. Like, just the whole pre-production, it just gets you excited.
Yes.
It just gets you excited. Like, oh yes, we about to make some cool stuff. You know, so.
And you're dreaming at that point, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're not like pressed for time with the schedule because you're shooting, and you're not in post-production and just kind of stuck with what you only have. Like, in the pre-production, like anything is possible. You know, you're still kind of like dreaming, and it's that like endless possibility that I think is really the most kind of like exciting part of photography.
Right. What would you say is the most challenging shoot or project you worked on, and how did you overcome it? If you want to talk about it.
Yeah. To me, the most challenging shoot that I've ever worked on was this 17 picture portfolio that I did for Freeze magazine.
Oh, wow.
And the creative director of Freeze had me go and photograph this Miami portfolio that was going to accompany this essay by an amazing writer named Edna Bonham. And she had written about Miami neighborhoods being gentrified, specifically the Little Haiti neighborhood. And I found that assignment like deeply challenging because I was given a level of sort of creative freedom by the magazine to really go out and photograph my own version of Miami. You know, so there was not a lot of strict boundaries, and having that kind of like endless expanse to play in made things actually more tricky than if they had been more specific about what they wanted to see from me. So between that and then also having to kind of make faithful photographs of Little Haiti, or how Little Haiti feels to me and how it seemed to feel to the people who I was going out and photographing, you know, was also difficult. You know, I've spent time in that neighborhood, but I don't have a personal, you know, connection to it. And so it was a real challenge to push myself to make sure that I was doing something that people who are from that neighborhood might, be proud of or feel excited
Mm-hmm.
about. And then on top of that, in like classic Florida fashion, it was a hurricane week here,
Oh
and so
wow.
I was fighting, clouds and rain
Yeah.
and gray skies. But
A lot
I'm
of
really happy
outdoor
with how that
exposure.
work turned out. I think, despite the challenges, I came away with something really, really rewarding.
Nah, yeah, for sure. And I was saying, a lot of underexposure. Like,
Definitely, yes, with those gray sky.
yeah,
Yeah, you gotta
yeah,
you gotta really think about your film and how
yeah.
it's gonna be developed and
That too.
printed.
That too.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I could say the same thing with my project, doing it for 10 years. And, you know, I'm from those communities, but then a lot of people don't, a lot of people think it's easy. Like,
Mm.
nah, like it's trying to talk to people and understand, like, look, I'm going to take a portrait of you. And then they tell you no. And it's
Yes.
like, damn, like, you don't understand how good this is. Like, yeah, so I definitely understand that, just like, documenting people, like just some type of like street photography or like photojournalism aspect of that. So I definitely feel that for sure.
Yeah, it seems effortless, but in reality, there's
Yeah.
so much effort that goes into it.
Shout out to the photographers that, like, all the legends that, and like, one of my favorite photographers is Esteban Oriol. I was blessed enough to actually meet him in Miami. And him telling me all these stories of like the street photography element of LA,
Mm,
and just like him just documenting and just interacting with the people, how certain challenges he faced. So it's just
mm.
like, this is like a universal language.
It
Like,
is, and his work is so
yeah.
amazing, and it's cool that we all kind of speak that language and can maybe learn from each other too. Like, I'm curious how you navigate like going up to someone asking for their portrait and getting a no. Like, what is your technique for convincing them that like, no, this has to be done. This is going to be so special. You don't understand.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I think we all have different techniques, but it's cool to hear
No,
the
for
ways in
sure.
which people navigate.
For sure. How do you stay motivated and inspired when dealing with creative blocks?
Hmm. Hmm. I would say for me, the most like effective way to stay motivated is to, gain some perspective. And what I mean by that is that when I'm in a creative block and I can't quite figure something out,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm just getting frustrated by whatever it is I'm working on, I try to like gain perspective by taking a step back, like physically, like, literally getting up from my desk or
Mm-hmm.
stepping away from a shoot and trying to just, embody a sense of cool and calmness and peace and use physical de-stressing techniques like breathing, to provide myself with like that perspective that I need to regain my motivation and revisit things in a new light. Um, it's a real thing I'm working on now.
It's
It's
hard.
not easy, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's worth it.
So I want to tap in more into you. I want to dive in more into you. What's a personal value or principle you always try to live by?
Hmm. Recently, the value that I've been trying to live by is being sensitive, and I want to approach situations in my life with a sensitivity for, not only myself, but for other people. So in the past few weeks, as I've put out my 2 shows and gotten the chance to accept these incredible awards, I've been thinking about all the communications and conversations that I'm having, and I'm trying to think of, sensitive ways to approach those. And it's a learning process, but it's really
Right,
beautiful to not approach life with like passion or anger, but with just sensitivity.
right.
It really um, lightens, your feet, if that makes sense,
No, for
the
sure,
way you move.
for sure. And that leads me to my next question. What are you most grateful for in life right now?
Hmm. I think I'm most grateful for my health. I'm most grateful for my friends and for my family. I'm blessed to be healthy, to be able to travel and be out in nature and hike and be outdoors and to have great friends and to have a family that loves and supports me. I know that not everyone is, fortunate enough to have those sort of things, and knowing that, I'm blessed with that really makes me feel lucky.
Right, right. So let's talk about your recent project, Florida Boys. Before I ask this question, I just want to say again, this project is fucking amazing. Like, oh my God, like just seeing you at the green space, those big prints, and just actually, cause I seen it digitally. And I remember when you first started it, or finishing up with it and seeing it, I was like, Josh, this is crazy. This is good. And then seeing the final outlook of everything and seeing the prints and just seeing how lively it is and just pops in your face. And I just want to say you did a hell of a job, great job. And yeah, this is crazy.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's crazy for me too. Yeah, don't get me wrong. It's crazy for me too, and I admire you and your eye and your taste, and so to get a compliment like that from you, it really means a lot to me.
No, for sure. Yeah. But tapping into the project, can you describe the main story or message behind the project?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Florida Boys is a group of stage narrative pictures that I make with small groups of young men from Florida in natural environments throughout the state. So, specifically, I invite young creative types from Miami, people who themselves are artists and actors and musicians and sculptors and painters and photographers and designers. And I bring them on road trips to remote locations throughout the state. So we go to parks, beaches, springs, forests, rivers, that sort of thing. And in inviting them out to nature with me, I'm asking them to essentially play the role of a young teenager. And what we're sort of after are these photographs that depict masculinity in a way that feels sort of true to me. So my version of masculinity is, one that's sort of sensitive. It's about being a dreamer or a wanderer, about being curious, about, being sensitive to nature and to yourself and to the people around you. And so through making these stage narrative pictures with these groups, I'm trying to, manifest that kind of masculinity and use photography as a tool to propagate that in the world. So if I grew up and felt like, maybe I was the only person like that amongst my friends or amongst the people in my neighborhood, photography has been this sort of revisionist tool for me to imagine a world where everybody's like that, or all the young men, I guess, are like that. And, I've been blessed to bring some incredible people along for these rides. And not only that, but to provide them with an incredible experience. And when we go out on these road trips, we meet up in Miami, we get in the van and we travel up to the springs and forests and beaches, and we go for about 3 days at a time.
Right. The fact that you do that is amazing. I remember you was telling me that it's amazing to get these group of kids or young people together. You don't know if they never probably met each other, and the fact that you just bring a connection to them as you go up the road and document.
It's true, yeah. Oftentimes they've never met or haven't met me before these photo shoots, and what's so beautiful is that they're open-minded enough to say yes, because I'm asking them, hey, can you get in the van with me? You don't know me, you don't know anyone else here, but we're gonna go somewhere, we're gonna make beautiful pictures, it's gonna be exciting, it's gonna be different, and it takes a really specific kind of person to think about that and be like, that's a smart idea, you know?
Yeah,
I mean, it is a little crazy, but the reward is so sweet that I've noticed with the people who I've brought along for these rides with me that they're really grateful and have a lot of, firsts that they might not have had they not said yes to this trip. So for some people, it's their first time, on a river in a kayak. For some people, it's their first time outside of South Florida. And for some people, it's just their first experience, on a road trip with friends or with new friends.
It's just really giving the real experience.
Exactly. Yeah. I think through photography, we can show people what the real Florida is, or what our version of Florida is, or how we want Florida to sort of be. So that's how I'm trying to, use this project and use this interest in making group pictures is to really like depict that, and then also like inspire other people to come out and be on the ride with me and to have their own experiences in nature, the way we are for the pictures.
No, for sure. That just even hearing you say that, it's just photography is beautiful, man.
Yeah.
It takes you places that you never would have imagined. You know, I think about those times, and then even hearing you say, "We're giving," I relate to that. We're giving people a side of Florida that a lot of people don't really see in our versions and stuff like that. So it's like I definitely feel that for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
From your point of view, how does this project reflect your personal connection to Florida? And because you elaborated earlier that you originally was born in Toronto, but then you eventually made Florida your home. So how does that, you know, how does the project reflect your connection to Florida?
You know, this project for me is a reflection of how I feel about Florida, and the way I feel is that it's a beautiful place. It's somewhere that's truly unique and magical, and a place that I feel lucky to be from or to call home. Um, you know, growing up, I didn't feel that way though. I remember as a kid, you know, itching to get out of Florida, never wanting to live in Miami when I grew up. And up until, you know, I was in college, I really didn't think I would spend my life down here. But in 2020, during the pandemic, I moved back to Miami to spend some time with my family. And what was supposed to be about a month or two long trip, you know, ended up being this, you know, 4, almost 5 year stint down here in Miami. And, you know, that's when I really fell in love. And I realized that what we have here is, you know, really unique and really special. And in a way, I'm using photography almost as an excuse to experience the rest of the state beyond South Florida. And I'm hoping to nurture for myself, and then hopefully even for others, a sense of connection or ownership over the entire state of Florida. You know, I like to joke that I'm kind of like this Florida man, but in reality, growing up, you know, like many other South Floridians, I never really left South Florida. I mean, I'd go to other cities and other states, and maybe go to Orlando, but like I never went to Gainesville. I never saw the Springs, you know, I
Wow.
never went to the Panhandle. And so if I was gonna kind of think of myself as like Florida man, then I had to really go and see Florida. And I sort of used this project and photography as a vehicle to do all of that.
Wow. Wow. It's crazy because I grew up driving throughout Florida. So I've seen, you know, my aunt used to take us to Tallahassee. So I know how that feels to drive on those long trips,
Yeah.
8 hour trips to go to, because that's how you know Florida is one of the largest states in America, because you'll drive through these cities and then going through Gainesville, Jacksonville, Tallahassee. So it's just like it started the older the younger version of me seeing your work or this project just made me appreciate those moments growing up and seeing that. But it made me see a whole nother light or another perspective on Florida where, you know, I only see it through your work, or just I'll probably see it on a little quick picture or whatever, but that's it. But just seeing that from that perspective is crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really beautiful that like you've been to some of those places in North Florida and Central Florida, and you have your own like memories or experiences of them. But then when you see my work, it's kind of further informing those experiences, or like open your eyes to like, you know, something that you might not have known or appreciated about those places. And you know, in a way, it's like with the world changing and climate change affecting our state in particular, I feel it's important to use the camera as a tool for preserving these places and hopefully inspiring people to go and like enjoy them, you know,
Yeah,
while
for
they're still
sure.
there. Because
For
who
sure.
knows, you know, in 50 years, 100 years, things might be different. And so we got to get out there and just enjoy the beauty of
Right.
our natural, yeah,
Right.
our
And
natural world.
it just capturing those, like you said, like how things is moving in the future. It just make you just sit, and that's what nature does. But your work makes you just sit there and really like grasp. I can't just look at the project and just be like skim through it. No, I have to sit with picture by picture by picture.
Wow.
So
I'm honored.
yeah,
Thank you for saying that.
nah, for sure. What role does culture or environment play in this project?
Hmm. Well, I'm thinking about culture and environment oftentimes in terms of history.
Okay.
So culture specifically, I'm thinking about the history of Florida or the American South in photographs. And I'm wondering like who the people were that were often depicted in those photographs and what they were made to look like or what they were shown doing. And one of the things that Florida Boys as a project does is that it invites young black and brown men from Miami to these natural landscapes. And I'm thinking about that in terms of history and how when we see young black and brown people in nature in Florida in historical photographs, it's not always as people enjoying that environment
Mm,
and playing and having freedom and being, themselves. It's oftentimes like relative to labor, um, or death or sadness, and so
right.
there's this element of culture and wanting to kind of show a more beautiful possibility for those people in that setting that I'm always thinking about, an environment. We talked about how we don't know what's going to happen to Florida's environment.
Yeah.
So, let's get people out there and let
Yeah.
them experience it
And,
while they still can.
and capture it as much as we can, for sure. What were some of the challenges you faced while working on this project?
Hmm. I think the biggest challenge while working on this project was not looking at the photographs I was making. So this is a long-term project. I've been working on it for almost 5 years now. And during those first 3 years where I went on something like 12 or 13 different road trips, I made a point to myself to not look at any of the film that I shot. So I'd
Wow.
come back from a trip, I'd have 40, 50, 60 rolls of film, and I put them in a drawer in a keep safe bag, and I closed that drawer and I wouldn't look at it. And it was only after that third year and doing 12 or 15 road trips that I decided, okay, maybe I should make sure that my camera still works.
Right, right, right.
Make sure that my ideas are working. And though that was a real challenge, not knowing how anything looked, but still going out and inviting people to do these road trips with me and make these pictures with me, it was also kind of a blessing. It allowed me to stay in that maker's mindset and to not think or worry about how are these pictures going to pair together and how am I going to edit everything, but rather just think about what am I shooting, what am I making,
Right,
who am I bringing out there and where are we, sort of going. So it was a challenge, but I guess it was also like a treat in a way.
right. It's like a little balance between both, for
Definitely.
sure. So I seen you. Well, I was there, but for both of them. But you had two shows. How was the overall outcome of those shows in your perspective?
For me, it was beautiful. It was incredible, opening my first large scale public art installation at the same time as I was debuting some pictures from the Florida Boys project was really exciting. I'm grateful for the turnout. I'm grateful for the reception from the Miami community. And most importantly, I'm just happy for the people in the photographs. I asked a lot of them to go on these road trips with me and not be able to see the work that we made for sometimes 4 or 5 years. And so I'm happy that those people I photographed get to now start to enjoy, what it is that we did and the pictures that we made. Um, and I'm excited to release more and
All
show
right,
more of that work.
all right. Did you have a particular audience in mind when creating Florida Boys?
Yeah, when I was making Florida Boys, I was often thinking about a younger version of me who would spend time in Barnes and Noble or on Tumblr or on Flickr and would subconsciously or maybe even consciously look for photographs that reminded me of myself or of my experiences in the world. And I know that for someone in that position, it was difficult to find, photographs that reminded me of what it's like growing up in Florida. Those things weren't like readily accessible, at least not in an art world context
Right.
or a book publishing context. So when I'm thinking about who my audience is and who Florida Boys might exist for, it's for young Floridians like me who want to see themselves in pictures, but maybe don't have access to those kinds of photographs. And maybe a kid, in a couple of years from now, will stumble into a Barnes and Noble in the Florida section or the art section,
Wow,
and they might see that book and pick it up and feel
that's a
like,
good
wow,
perspective. That's a good
thank you.
perspective. Yeah, it
Yeah,
definitely
will
is.
help them feel seen.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Speaking of that, of the bookstore and everything, um, how do you see Florida Boys evolving in the future, if all, or if at all? I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, there's a couple venues that I want this project to evolve into, and most importantly, I think it's important to have the work considered in its totality. So I want to create a photo book that combines the best of these road trip pictures and puts them all in one place. That to me was a driving force in doing like a sequence of road trips and going out year after year and doing it. I wanted to have a complete body of work that shows you the grand scope of this vision of Florida that we're making. But it's also important to me to like show those photographs on the walls in galleries or in a museum. And so I'd love to have a solo museum exhibition of this work one day, and continue to explore, maybe showing it as large-scale public art installations, which was something I never dreamed of doing, but got to do this past year and really, really loved. So there's definitely a future for Florida Boys, and I look forward to sharing that work with the world and with the people in them,
All
because a
right.
lot of people still haven't seen their photos, and I know
Wow, I didn't know
they're itching to see them. So
that. That's
we
crazy.
got to make that happen.
Well, I want to say this too in transition. Congratulations to your residency in Key West, right? And that was the space alone looks crazy. I love it. I've never been to Key West. I always tell everybody tells me, Aaron, you got to go to Key West. Go to Key West. Go to Key West. But just seeing that, that room in your studio rather, is amazing. So I just want to say congratulations
Thank
on
you.
the residency and the prize.
Thank you.
This I love seeing my friends getting they just due. And I want to say this front hand and documented just in general, just my appreciation for what you do in the, South Florida art scene and, you know, um, in the photography community too. I don't think I ever expressed this, but, you definitely always inspired me one, and you always encouraged me like, Aaron, I think you should do this, I think you should do that. Like, you definitely encouraged me a lot of the things that even my award, like, you like, Aaron, I don't know, I think you should do it. So I just want to let you know that right now,
Yeah,
while we're doing the
you
interview.
inspire me too, and
Yeah,
and you encourage me too, and it's so important. Like, we need friends who are also artists and also photographers to keep us going. I mean, we all have friends who aren't in the art world or aren't practicing photographers, and
right.
we love those people very much, but at the end of the day, like, it's a lonely pursuit, and so
Definitely is.
we need our homies.
No, for sure. Okay, in transition, if you could photograph any person in the world, dead or alive, who would it be?
Frank Ocean.
Wow. Yeah, you did tell me that once. Yeah. I could see that though. I could see that for
Yeah,
sure.
that would be a dream for sure.
Mhm. If you weren't a photographer, what do you think you'd be doing instead?
I think I would be an artist. Is that cheating? Can I say that?
That's kind of cheating.
All right, all
Kind of
right.
cheating, because you are an artist in a way. So
True. True. I mean,
that's
I
a
do.
hard question too. So I know it's.
Yeah, it's a hard question. I know I would be doing something with my hands, and I would be trying to do something creative or make something beautiful. So, maybe working with food or flowers, or baking, um, or writing or making movies. These are all things I'm really passionate about.
Right.
And I think I spend a lot of my downtime, you know, doing that kind of thing. So if I wasn't photographing, maybe I'd be doing something like that.
Right. So I got a couple more questions. What do you want people to know or remember about you beyond your work?
Hmm. Wait, what do I want them to know about me?
Like, what do you want people to know or remember
Hmm.
about you beyond your work? For people that just fans of you, or people that just know you for your work, but just them being a fan of you. Like, I'm a fan of Josh, the person.
It's hard to believe that I have like fans or anything like that, but I guess I would want people to know that like I'm an approachable person. I want to help and I enjoy talking to other people about things that I'm passionate about. So yeah, let's chat about photography or Florida or nature or anything that you want to chat about.
What do you what so and I guess this is somewhat part of the question. What would I ask as well? What do you want people to remember you by?
Mm.
Like, let's say some of your fans, they meet you, but then they're like, damn, those
Mm.
little moments. What do you, from your perspective, what do you
Yeah.
want people to remember you by after those conversations? And they probably not going to see you again.
Yeah, I think I want to be remembered as just a sweet guy,
Mm-hmm.
someone that's thoughtful and caring and considerate. Um, in life, we come up against so much hardship,
Right.
and it's the least I can do to try to be kind and, you know, considerate of others. So if you remember me for one thing beyond my work, like let it be just that nice attitude, that positivity.
Right. So, last question. Any last words or any advice for the people out here?
Hmm.
I'll ask you.
My advice is turn off your alarms. Um, any last words? I mean, something that I haven't said before. Yeah, I mean, I would just inspire people or hope to inspire people to look at history and think about the artists or photographers that came before them and to spend time in your library, spend time with books, spend time on the internet. And if you can, if you're fortunate enough to do those things and absorb what's around, absorb what came before you and made it possible for you to be here right now, and you'll learn a lot. There's a lot to be derived from the photographers and artists that made it possible for us to be here. So get out there and experience that stuff and just have fun.
For sure. How can the audience support you or get a hold of you or follow your journey?
I mean, you can, find my first zine, which is called Tropicana. It's in a couple libraries around Miami and a library in New York and a library in DC. But you can also, catch me on all those places.
All right.
Instagram, website. Yeah.
Nah, for sure. Well, Josh, thank you for being part of this episode. Thank you again. Thank you for just sitting down in this beautiful nature with a full of mangroves behind you. And yes, again, it's a truly honor. I can't wait for your future endeavors and continue being great.
Thank you, Aaron. You
Mm.
too. This was a real treat. So thank you for having me.
No, for sure. Bless.